Following the removal of the grenade system from Team Fortress 2 in early to mid-2007, the specifics of which we've discussed in the last episode, the TF team made attempts to reuse the hundreds of hours of work that went into the initial implementation and expand specifics into their own unique weapons. It failed. It was then attempted again a few months later. It failed. The concept of a throwable weapon eventually made its way to the public experience through Jarate. However, it was preceded and proceeded by dozens of prototypes and concepts. Everything you're about to see is real, written by the Team Fortress team, yet left on the cutting room floor between the years of 2008 and 2013. This is Team Fortress 2's Cut Content Episode 5, A F***ing Brick, and other unused throwables. Throwables, in general, are a cut experimental weapon type that gives players the ability to throw unique objects with specific abilities. Like Mad Milk, but more generalized and designed to be used by multiple classes. All throwables were pre-chargeable, meaning the amount of time the player held down the attack key before throwing directly affected the throwables' characteristics, such as total given damage, for example. There were dozens of known types of throwables, the first we'll discuss being the brick. The key feature here is, surprisingly, the ability to throw a brick. Upon firing this weapon, a projectile is launched in the player's direction, similar to Jarate. This entity actually exists in the retail builds of the game. However, this weapon does not hold the ability to deal splash damage, which makes the concept of brick throwing more of a hit-or-miss experience, being something extremely difficult to balance for players of all skill levels. Bricks have been speculated to be found in prototyped destructible maps, where destroyed fortresses or buildings would supply ample bricks for players on both teams, again making balance a tough proposition. The smoke grenade started life as an early iteration of Spy's own sets of unique grenade types discussed in the last episode. However, the later iterations were experimented as cloak replacers. This would have been a new weapon type that was much like that seen in Counter-Strike Global Offensive. Upon throwing, this projectile explodes into a massive smoke cloud, blocking the view for anyone who tries to look through it. This throwable went by many names, such as the smoke grenade, the smoke bomb, and the smoke shield. It was iterated upon throughout most of Team Fortress 2's active development period. However, due to a combination of visual bugs and balancing, not only its interactions with other players, but the weapon type it was set to replace was never figured out. Of all the known throwables, the Bread Monster throwable was, by far, the most finished. Featuring completed assets, full functionality within the retail build of Team Fortress 2, and has been speculated to be more than just a prototype. When this weapon projectile touches an enemy, it attaches itself and applies a bleeding damage effect for 5 seconds, while also creating unique blood particles and sound effects. This model was later used for the self-aware beauty mark Jarate reskin introduced in the Love and War update. The use of bread-type weapons in general were cut following the release of Expiration Date and the Love and War update. However, there was much more cut. Everything Expiration Date related, such as the Bread Monster boss, is for another episode. By the way, on that note, all bread was to be throwable in setup time. The concept of giving players something fun to do during setup is for another episode. However, in the months leading up to Love and War, bread started appearing in teleports, each representing the 9 classes. Originally, this bread was to be picked up, eaten, or thrown during setup. The concept wasn't finished in time, and it just ended up being seen in the teleporters and nothing else. Some of the original concepts for throwables expanded on core systems found within the stock weapons shipped back in 2007. For example, full functionality exists in the code to allow Spy to throw his knives. Throwable knives were a variant of the knife that allowed for, as the name implies, a player to throw knives across long distances. Upon throwing, if a knife projectile hits an enemy, it would deal a fixed amount of damage depending on where the knife hit the enemy. So much like retail knives, it would crit the player if hitting the enemy's back. The difference is that this throwable knife could not insta-kill an enemy. The target dummy was a weird concept. The sole purpose of this throwable was to create the target dummy's model from the training mode wherever it lands. It is unknown which class would use the weapon or why anyone would find this weapon useful. It's possible that this weapon was just made as a joke. However, and unfortunately, the true nature of the target dummy weapon will probably never be known. Lastly, was the Repel. The Repel was a throwable that expanded the core mechanic of the Pyro's Air Blast. When the Repel weapon hit an enemy, an Air Blast would affect the enemy in the direction of the throwable's initial velocity, while also dealing some amount of damage. It's also worth noting that the Quick Fix Uber Charge specifically was made immune to the effect of this unreleased weapon. There are more, many more, such as snowballs, paint guns allowing for Splatoon-esque gameplay, water balloons, and a few others. However, the functionality is threadbare compared to the examples listed here. Team Fortress 2 is a treasure trove of lost content, and next time, we will be discussing something you've likely never heard of. Stay tuned and get subscribed. By the way, want to talk about more lost content with me and my friends? Join the Tyler McVicker Discord server, invite link down in the description below. This is Tyler McVicker, signing off. Adios.